In this hour, with Trump intensifying his trade war with our allies, our friends up north, Canada. As Americans continue to grapple with the ongoing affordability crisis, Trump's policies are again threatening to drive the prices we pay even higher. Trump, who loves to talk about Canada becoming a U.S. state, posted that Canada wanted, quote, the benefits of being a state without being one. They have also charged our great farmers for many years massive amounts of tariffs. No more. Comes after Canada said Saturday it would match dollar for dollar Trump's new 50% tariffs that went into effect after trade talks fell apart on Friday. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney said his country had been, quote, attacked by the new American tariffs.
In recent days, the United States proposed new terms that were uneconomic, unfair, and undermined the net benefits for Canada and called into question the reliability of any deal. In short, they asked too much and they offered too little. You're at war when you get attacked. We got attacked.
Falling deeper into a trade war would hit you at home hard, passing on higher prices to consumers already frustrated by higher costs from President Trump's war with Iran. Canada's dollar-for-dollar retaliation would take effect on September 8th, the day after Labor Day, targeting things like American steel, dairy, appliances, and agricultural equipment. Joining us now is Congressman Brendan Boyle of Pennsylvania, the ranking Democrat on the House Budget Committee. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us. I want to read out to people what might be impacted by the Canadian products impacted by U.S. tariffs, because folks may not know what we even share with each other. Wood products, there's 36 kinds of plywood, beer, wine, and spirits, dairy products, clothing, and textiles, and jewelry, and even more specific items. I'm not even going to try to read the first word on there because I don't know what that is. The next are capes, cloaks, tracksuits, national flags, wigs, all right, drag queens are going to be very upset, false beards and eyebrows, ice and field hockey equipment. These are all specific items that would be impacted. When you hear that the president is going into another trade war with another ally, after failing to get some negotiations, and also let's not forget the USMCA existed. It was supposed to be, it was a trade deal that he himself in 2018, I want to say 2019, signed between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. And yet here we are at war, as Mark Carney put it, in a trade war with our allies.
Yeah, I just want to level set, and given the breadth and depth of the list of products you showed there, this might not be a surprise for people to learn that for all of the attention and all the time that gets showered on China as it relates to trade, Canada is actually a larger trading partner for the United States than China is. In fact, Canada is our single largest market for U.S. exports. The reality is the sort of economic damage that will be done to the United States by having a trade war with the country that is our number one market for the goods that we produce and export, this is going to be massive. Overall, in terms of both exports and imports, China is by far the second largest trading partner the United States has. Only Mexico is slightly larger. So this is a trade war in which both sides will lose and lose badly. And at a time in which the American economy is really teetering on recession, this is the kind of thing that actually could push us over the edge.
Congressman, while Trump is ratcheting up the trade war with Canada, he is also temporarily easing U.S. beef tariffs, irking cattle producers. This is according to Reuters. Trump is going to sign an executive order that will expand the amount of ground beef that can enter the U.S. with lower import tariffs, and it'll be in effect for 90 days. This move has incurred criticism from the Republican Party. Two senators, Senator Deb Fischer from Nebraska and Senator Tim Sheehy of Montana. Deb Fischer said on Friday that we all want lower grocery prices, but as I've said for months, we cannot do it at the expense of American producers. Flooding the market with foreign beef hurts our livestock industry and undermines the long-term solution. Growing the U.S. cattle herd to meet demand. Is easing beef tariffs something that Democrats support? And if not, what are the ways in which Democrats feel that you can all immediately lower grocery store prices for Americans right now?
Yeah, I can't help but note the irony that Donald Trump is sticking it the most to the very people who voted for him just 2 years ago. You know, overall, the Donald Trump tariff taxes have been a disaster. When you take them, not just on beef, but in aggregate, these are the largest tariffs that we have faced in almost a century. The last time tariffs were this large, of course, was the Great Depression. And it is seen as one of the major causes of that Great Depression. So Donald Trump economics has been a disaster for the American consumer. And the quickest way that we can bring down costs certainly at the grocery stores, but then overall at Walmart, at Target, everywhere, the quickest way to bring down costs are to end the Trump tariff taxes once and for all. The question, though, is why is a Republican majority in Congress just so weak that they're not willing to stand up for this president or stand up to this president? Freudian slip. Instead, they're standing up for this president and against the American consumer.
From beef, which is a humongous issue that I think the president used to be really good, Congressman, at kind of gauging how people who voted for him would behave, right? Like what would really piss them off? What are the things that he could say to make them feel better? And it feels like with farmers and ranchers, he continues to say the wrong thing. Right. My full transparency, my father-in-law is a rancher, I think 5th generation in South Dakota. And so, I never thought I'd know as much as I do about how small beef operations work. And I think people don't understand that the majority of places and folks that are ranchers, these aren't the big places that have thousands and thousands of cows, or places that have 200, 300 cows, and maybe one person like my father-in-law who actually deals with it. Do you think this is an opportunity for Democrats to take those folks who have been upset, maybe some of them who have voted for Donald Trump and Republicans in the past, and take that ire and make them vote for Democrats? What are the policies that can make that happen?
It's an opportunity for Democrats, but also it is, on the other hand, a threat that this administration could get even worse in terms of its anti-immigration rhetoric and actions. So in terms of an opportunity for us, we need to be laser focused on bringing down costs for the American people. I'm the lead Democrat, as you know, on the Budget Committee. This is entirely what I've been working on for the last several years now. That is going to be my top priority if I get that gavel after November and become chairman of the committee. Unfortunately, this Republican Congress has only made costs even more expensive for the American people, especially in the area of health care. But I alluded at the beginning of my answer to the threat. I am very concerned that Donald Trump will continue to follow the autocrat's handbook, which is, as the economy gets worse, distract people by something else, by finding a group to demonize and blame. And so I think we also have to be wary that in the next couple of months, as we get closer to the election, this administration will get even more aggressive as it relates to ICE and what they call the crackdown on illegals, but so far has really hurt so many communities across this nation.
And Congressman, I do want to stay on the high prices that Americans are dealing with right now, because I think it's sort of hard to reconcile how anything and any policy on the Democratic side or the Republican side are going to actually be able to lower prices without an end to the war in Iran. But the administration, despite all of the rhetoric that the economy and what Americans are dealing with right now is a hoax, they are doing some ad hoc policy fixes here and there. One of the other things that they recently announced was getting rid of anti-smog requirements. This usually allows, in America at least, to switch to a summer gasoline blend to prevent smog from happening. That usually lasts until September 15th. But now what they have announced is essentially a lift on those blends. Is that something that Democrats support? I mean, I just want to get into a little bit of more of the nitty gritty about what do Democrats support in the interim before the war can come to an end to actually lower these U.S. average gas prices, which as of today are at $4.10 a gallon.
Yeah, I would point out, actually, gas prices are higher today, this late into the calendar, than at any other point in American history. Even before, when we've seen high gas prices, typically by the second half of the year, they have come down, that summer surge being over. So this is truly historic for all the wrong reasons. But I do want to just take issue with one thing you said. There's no question that this reckless, idiotic Trump started Iran war has driven up costs at the pump and increased costs in other areas even more. But let's not forget, from the moment that Donald Trump announced his absurdly named Liberation Day, that's when inflation that had been coming down month after month through the course of 2024 and the first couple months of 2025, that's when inflation started to turn around and be made great again, going in the increased direction as opposed to decreasing. It was from about April of 2025 right up until this year that we saw costs going up because of those Trump tariff taxes placed on over more than 90 nations and the reciprocal taxes that many placed on us. So, yes, the Iran war, reckless, stupid. He doesn't know how to get out of it, has absolutely no plan. It has made us weaker. It has hurt the American consumer, but it didn't just start with this Iran war. It started with the Trump tariff tax policy that has been a disaster.
Don't forget the number one rule. Donald Trump is never wrong. Joining us, MS Now senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard, journalist and author of The Cross Section on Substack, Paul Waldman, MS Now business analyst and author of The Message of the Markets on Substack, Ron Insana, is with us as well. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. Ron, what's going on? What's the point? What's the strategy? What do we get out of this?
Point and strategy, it very hard to identify at this juncture. What we get out of this so far is likely higher prices, no matter how you cut it.
But what is their best argument? I mean, when they go and they make an honest argument about why we need to have steeper tariffs on Canada, what are they trying to say?
I don't know. I have to be honest. It's really difficult to understand, given that the president renegotiated the U.S., Mexico, Canada free trade agreement in his first term. We used to call it NAFTA, and presumably got what he wanted out of that. And now he wants something else that's somewhat, ill-defined or undefined. They're even talking about in the discussion late in the conversations over the weekend that they wanted to change labeling so they didn't have to put certain things in French in Quebec, where that is the spoken language. And so they're getting into all kinds of things, dictating who Canada can do other trade agreements with. That's not something we would accept, nor would any of our other trading partners. So it's very difficult, other than this kind of really maybe obsessive idea that the president has of making Canada our 51st state and kind of forcing that hand. I'm not.
No. You're getting to where I was going to go.
Oh, sorry.
It's fine. I'm happy you're there, because we have a little bit of sound from the Treasury Secretary being asked about this, because this is frankly what PM Mark Carney says is going on behind the scenes. Let's listen to Bessent's answer.
I think he would like Canada to come to the table and negotiate in good faith. They were offered quite a good deal last week. They chose to reject it. Unfortunately, Prime Minister Carney rose to power on an anti-American, anti-Trump platform. I believe he was more than 20 points behind, and he seems to have gone back to his old playbook. And I think one has to ask oneself, is he trying to benefit himself, the Liberal Party, or the Canadian people?
Okay, so I'm not quite sure if that was the answer to the 51st state question, but he did get asked it because that is the talk.
Yeah, and it's been the talk since President Trump's gotten back into office in his second term. And it certainly doesn't make much sense. We've had phenomenal relations with Canada, both, from a geopolitical perspective and an economic perspective for quite some time. So none of this really makes sense, doesn't seem strategic, and doesn't seem to have a point, particularly since the president was going to try to renegotiate the free trade agreement with Mexico and Canada sometime in the relatively near future. So it seems like everything else that we've seen from an economic policy perspective, scattershot.
Paul, do you make any sense of this?
Yeah, I think a lot of it may come just from Trump's own ill feelings about Canada. And I should point out, too, I think that it may be hard for Americans to fully appreciate just how incredibly insulting all of that 51st state talk was to Canadians. The idea that they are a sovereign country that has an identity independent of the United States, no matter how close we may be, is something that is absolutely fundamental to how Canadians think of themselves. And that reaction is a part of how Canadians and how Prime Minister Carney are going to react to the things that the Trump administration does. And so they are going to want to assert their own sovereignty, their own independence, their own autonomy. And so all of the things that Trump says only makes it more likely that they're going to want to stand up to us. And that in turn may make him even angrier. You know, how dare they not be more appreciative of me and want to retaliate when the U.S. is going to impose tariffs? And I would say one other thing, too. This is going to be it's going to absolutely fall flat with the public. We had a long discussion and debate about the utility of tariffs, and Donald Trump lost that argument. He tried so hard to convince the public that tariffs are great and they produce prosperity and they don't raise prices. And the American people pretty much rejected that argument that he made, and so now a new round of tariffs on Canada, which, by the way, Americans they like Canadians. They like the country of Canada, even if Trump doesn't. I don't see how that's going to get any kind of public support, especially if, as Ron says, it's only going to raise prices.
Honestly, it's like a South Park episode. That's how little it makes sense. Let me try to get into the strategy further with you, Vaughn. Let me first off, we just showed a Paul Krugman headline next to an image of empty shelves, and I want to put that back on the screen so I can explain it. What you're seeing there, buy Canada instead. Canadians are buying Canadian goods instead of American goods. They're buying Canadian liquor instead of American liquor. They are actively protesting the Americans with their wallets in Canada. Look at all those other very full shelves. So they are willing to, they've proven they're willing to withstand economic pain because, as Paul was saying, they are so insulted. Donald Trump is still laying it on. Here's what he said on Truth Social. He says they've been ripping us off. Canada's been ripping off the United States of America for years. Their ridiculously high tariffs on our farmers and farm products has made life impossible for these great American patriots. On January 1st, 2027, tariffs on all cars, trucks, both large and small, automotive parts and steel will be increased to 50%. Is he hearing from people directly in the Oval, farmers in Iowa, car makers, Elon Musk, I don't know, that Canada is the real bad guy here?
Nobody is seemingly able to convince him after 18 months that they're not. Katie, look, 10 days after Donald Trump entered the Oval Office, he signed an executive order placing 25% tariffs on Canada. And why is that important? There was no greater importer of American goods than Canada in 2024 and the years prior. They import 3 times what China imports of American goods. They were the top importer of American goods. What Donald Trump is telling the American public is just so incredibly far off from the facts that it is more than a lack of acknowledgement of what American producers do in the markets that they seek to build. It's literally, if you're an American farmer, right, if you work in the dairy industry, you go to Canada and you try to convince, right, particular buyers to buy your goods. That takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of years of building up those sorts of relationships. And Donald Trump is single-handedly taking an axe to these markets. And Canada, instead of buying American goods, they are explicitly, Mark Carney now turning towards Europe to strengthen their relationships despite the body of water in between. And I think it's important to note, Katie, just take the president's words now in that Truth Social post and compare them to 2020. He was literally hailing the USMCA agreement as a victory for manufacturers, for automotives. He was hailing it as a victory for the egg industry, poultry industry, for American dairy farmers. I was at the World Dairy Expo in Madison, Wisconsin, when the USMCA trade agreement was agreed to. And it was American dairy farmers that were cheering, Canadian dairy farmers that were bemoaning it, because Donald Trump actually did get a greater share of American dairy that was being allowed to come into Canada, and an agreement by Canada to even lift some of the low prices on some of their own dairy products here. So I think for the president, it's just, it's so far from the truth being his own words from 6 years ago.
Is it a Trudeau hangover? Trudeau was buddy, I'm serious, buddy with Obama, and Trudeau was prime minister when Donald Trump was first there. Is it just Donald Trump didn't like Trudeau and now he's passing it off on the new guy?
I'm not sure it's that. I mean, he also feels the same way about Mexico. And, you know, what he also doesn't appreciate is the integrated supply chain.
He doesn't speak about Mexico with the same amount of disdain and vitriol.
Well, we were going to bomb the cartels at one point early in his...
Bombing the cartels, yes. But I think there does seem to be something different with the way that he addresses Mexico
and I'm not,
Canada.
I'm not sure it's just Trudeau, but Mark Carney was head of the Bank of England, head of the Bank of Canada, Harvard educated, Oxford educated. He's a very different breed of cat than the president is accustomed to dealing with. And he's also a very independent economic thinker and a very strong individual. Trudeau, I mean, I guess there might be some bad blood there, but the president does have this preoccupation with Canada as a vassal state. But we have this integrated supply chain with Canada and Mexico in building automobiles, right, which is critical to the way in which our economy operates. So I don't understand the vitriol. I don't understand the approach to this, and it doesn't make economic sense in any way, shape, or form.
We're talking.
As we await the announcement of the Trump administration's much-hyped new economic sanctions against Iran, President Trump is waging a separate economic war with one of America's closest allies, Canada. Trade talks this weekend failed, leading to another round of steep tariffs by Trump, and this ahistorical analysis of Canada from Trump's transportation secretary.
It's a country that doesn't have a military. It has a country that has a single-payer healthcare system that's failing. They have record-high euthanasia rates. And so to think that they're going to go to war with Donald Trump and actually win that war with the U.S., I think it's foolish on their part.
Okay, Tim, Eddie, and Bharat are still with us. Yes, Tim, same. Canada does have a military. Canadian soldiers gave their lives fighting alongside Americans in Afghanistan. I'm not sure what any of what Duffy said has to do with anything, much less trade talks, or why the transportation secretary is chiming in. But to me, it just all adds to the cauldron of chaos.
Yeah, Duffy, the lies and the smears about Canada are offensive. And Canadians died defending us after we were attacked in 9/11. You might remember Canada kind of housed Americans who were on flights in the air that had to be rediverted during 9/11, and they went to Canada for a couple of days. There are all these stories about how well that they were treated, while we were dealing with the aftermath of that. So it's extremely offensive and stupid. Sean Duffy probably just doesn't know anything because he doesn't read. But in addition to that, I think that there is some real lessons here for Democrats domestically from Mark Carney, because this is tough in Canada. I mean, there are real ramifications for the people of Canada here, by not agreeing to a bad deal. I mean, a bad deal would be better economically for Canada than no deal. But Carney is looking at the long game. The Canadians seem to be behind him, and he's really standing up to Trump and just saying no. And I think that this is what a lot of people, domestically are looking for from the Schumer and Jeffries leadership in the Democratic Party. Carney's kind of a centrist technocrat guy, and I think he's providing a model for Democrats here on what people are looking for when it comes to standing up to this administration when they're, acting crazily and corrupt and irresponsible like they are in this trade war.
I mean, Bharat, it should be devastating to Americans that one of our closest allies is now imagining a way forward without us, both as it relates to national security and as it relates to trade and the economy. You had Ontario Premier Doug Ford saying that Canada should be ready to cut electricity and critical minerals to the U.S. Is that a realistic next step? Talk to me about the impact there.
Yeah, I think people would be surprised to learn that Canada is our second largest trading partner and that we do double the amount of trade with Canada that we do with China. So for all the focus on trade war with China, the fact is Canada can do quite a bit of damage to the United States economy if they go forward with retaliatory tariffs in response to what Trump is doing. And we're quite reliant on Canadian imports for everything from steel to energy. It's one of our largest sources of energy. And so they have the capacity to inflict quite a bit of economic harm. And that's why you see people like Senator Collins from Maine speaking out about it. Our northern border states are likely to be quite heavily affected by this in particular. You're going to see that effect in Michigan and Wisconsin and Montana and so on. And it just gets to the self-defeating nature of all of this, as people have talked about. Canada is one of our closest international economic partners, one of our closest allies in terms of foreign policy and the military. And now you have cabinet members going on TV and lobbing lame insults about the Canadian people and the Canadian government. To what end? Again, what are we trying to accomplish here? Canada is not taking advantage of us. We have a good, healthy system of trade with Canada. Nobody's taking advantage. And we both benefit from that. What goal are we trying to achieve here? When we see higher prices for everything from energy to wine to hockey sticks because of these actions, the American people are going to sit around and say, what are we supposed to be gaining from all of this? And why are we pissing off one of our biggest allies to accomplish all of this?
Right. And that has to do both with costs, Eddie, and just the view of America on the world stage. There was a devastating line from Mark Carney. I'm sure you heard it in describing these negotiations, where he said sometimes the signature from the U.S. is, quote, written in pencil. If the Canadians don't trust us, who then does?
Right. I think it's important for us to read Mark Carney's response, Canada's response to Trump's trade war, his assault, in light of his speech at Davos. Mm-hmm. Remember, that speech is going to come. Mm-hmm. That speech is going to go down in history. He basically described the United States as losing its standing, that we allowed this United States to act, even though it utilized its power for its own ends, it still afforded a level of stability to the global economy. But he implied at least, that we can no longer rely on the U.S. to act in that way any longer. And I think it's important for us to understand his response in relation to that description of the global economy that he laid out at Davos. And then we'll have an understanding of how he's moving and where we're headed, it seems to me.
Okie doke, let's get down to business. President Trump is justifying his 50% tariffs on Canadian goods, saying Canada has spent years taking advantage of U.S. farmers. But for fact's sake, the United States has always made out with the better end of the deal. About 70% of Canadian exports go to the United States. It is incredibly reliant on America, and replacing that will not be easy on their economy or on Canadians. What do? So they sell us big commodity items like oil, petroleum, and lumber. We refine it, add some bells and whistles, and then we sell it back as a much higher value product like electronics, cars, chemicals. That means at the end of the day, the United States makes more money. So if their prices are going to go up and our prices are going to go up, and we can't just sign new trade agreements with other countries overnight, my question is, what is the point of this war? Joining me now, Ron Insana, MS Now business analyst and publisher of The Message of the Markets on Substack. And Brooke Masters is here, U.S. managing editor for the Financial Times. Ron, what are your thoughts on this? Like, even if it doesn't have a huge economic impact on you and I don't understand the point.
Nor do I, Steph. And this is kind of rooted in the president's desire, I think, to make Canada the 51st state. There's that comment has been circulating now, even throughout these conversations and arguments we've been having with Canada. But at the end of the day, the president in his first term renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement with both Canada and the United States, apparently unsatisfied with his own renegotiation, and now trying to negotiate with Canada again and threatening to put tariffs, which are now in effect, on a wide variety of goods. It's $20 billion. Again, as you say, it's not going to have that much of an impact. But at a time when inflation's not coming down, pushing up the prices of anything else coming into the United States doesn't make any sense. It's not going to help inflation. It's not going to ease the Fed's burden at this juncture of trying to control inflation either. So I don't truly, as Ambassador McFaul said with respect to what's going on with Iran, I don't understand this either.
It certainly doesn't help Mike Rogers, who's running as a Republican in Michigan, and it certainly doesn't help Susan Collins, who's running for re-election in Maine. But what do you think it means for the average American?
Initially, it's not that big. I mean, most of Canadian-U.S. trade is still covered by the USMCA, more than 80%. This is hockey sticks. It's alcohol.
Ice skates.
It's ice skates. I mean, it's symbolic, I guess. So I think in and of itself, it's probably not going to push up prices that much, but it certainly doesn't help. And it comes at a time when, it's becoming more and more clear that tariffs do feed through to the ordinary consumer. And this will just be another one.
Yeah, they feed through to the American consumer. And when and if the Supreme Court shoots down the tariffs, businesses get that money back. We're seeing it happens in the tunes of tens of millions of dollars. But you and me, Target ain't giving us a refund. Okay, we have this trade war with Canada. And now, Ron, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is expected to make this massive new announcement, these new sanctions on Iran. Is this Trump again thinking that our economic relationship, our economic power with these countries is more than maybe he thinks it is?
Yeah, Iran's economy is already a basket case. Their currency is $2 million to the U.S. dollar. I mean, it can't get much worse beyond this. I mean, and obviously the ruling regime in Iran doesn't really, care that much about how much its people suffer. We've seen that with the execution of 53,000 individuals. So I'm not sure what levers they're going to pull. And again, as was said in the prior segment, this is really about China. China is Iran's benefactor to a certain extent. And so unless this includes China and retaliatory sanctions against them for having dealt with Iran favorably, it's not that meaningful in a certain sense. And so, again, it's something that I guess the Treasury Secretary will explain. He may also talk about his plans to lower interest rates by buying bonds as a separate issue. So there's a lot coming this afternoon that we have to listen to with respect to the Treasury Secretary. But again, I'm not quite sure what kind of firepower they have against Iran economically, unless it includes China and Russia to a certain extent.
When Trump picked Scott Bessent to be the Treasury Secretary, it was after some heavy lobbying from some of the biggest investors on Wall Street. Bessent wanted the job and Howard Lutnick. And they urged Trump to pick him, saying Scott Bessent was going to be the adult in the room. I said, I don't know what Scott Bessent is going to do, but he is highly qualified for this job. Does the investment community still feel great about him? Because people crush me on Twitter constantly saying, I thought you said he knew what he was doing. He was qualified. That doesn't mean he was going to do the right thing.
He's certainly having less impact, or not having the impact he wants to have. If you think about last week's bond market intervention, where he announced the U.S. was going to start buying back its own bonds, which is a weird thing to do for a big country that has safe assets. But initially that did affect spreads. And
for a minute.
Exactly. They bounced right back, which suggests that he's not having the same level of impact that he once did. I think, he is still considered more grown up than other people in the room. But there aren't a lot of people with economic experience of the kind that the markets want in the Trump administration. So I think he is still seen as the least worst option.
Ron?
I'm not sure, Steph. I mean, look, he ran a hedge fund on his own from 2017 to 2023 that went from $5 billion in assets to $577 million, lost 18 of his 20 investors during that period. He did well when he was with George Soros and Stan Druckenmiller, two very well-known hedge fund managers. So his piece in the Financial Times, quoting Pascal's wager argument this morning is, a little over the top with respect to an attempt to create some sort of intellectual framework for what he's about to do. I'm not sure he is as qualified as people originally thought. And certainly the execution of the bond buyback last week, which pushed bond yields down by, just a very small fraction. And even this morning, the yield on the 10-year notes at 4.71%. Now he's saying he's going to use the Treasury's general fund to buy bonds. There's $1 trillion there. He can't use it all. And it's not having any impact this morning. So I think to a certain extent, one could say thus far he's been overrated.
Okay, if he's making these, and I'm not going to call them extraordinary moves with regard to the bond market, but if he's making these highly unusual moves and they're having little or no impact, doesn't that make our markets even more vulnerable?
I would say yes. the whole point of having, firepower at the Fed and in the Treasury is that when things go bad, they can act. Think about 2020, where we all remember that March period where it really felt scary, and they jumped in, they fixed it. It is not clear how many other tools there are. I mean, Bessent is interested in doing untraditional things, so I suppose maybe he's still got some more things in his magic hat. But it does raise the question, like, what else could he do if things went really bad? And at the moment, it does feel that the credit cycle might be turning. We're seeing some weird stuff in the private credit markets. And, the bond markets, obviously yields are not great from the point of view of the president. And it can affect people. It's not clear to me what happens if things really start to wobble.
And if you're really excited and say, hey, but the stock market's great, take a look at fundamentals versus valuations, and then you can get really scared. All right, you two, thank you both very much.
These tariffs, any of these trade deals come from any kind of plan. It feels very ad hoc. All the reporting shows it's very ad hoc. There were, when he was doing the tariffs, when it was a Liberation Day last year, in the book of Regime Change by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, he's just out here saying, give them 20, give them 10% tariffs. There's no plan here. What does that mean for the economics of the United States?
There's no plan. What there is in Donald Trump's mind is leverage, and the leverage comes from the idea that Canada exports 75% of its exports to the U.S. We export 15% of our exports there. So they're a lot more dependent on us than we are on them. And that leads Donald Trump in his Trumpian mind to decide that he can kick them around and bully them and insist on everything, including, by the way, trying to undermine their sovereign rights, which is one of the reasons these talks collapsed. He was telling the Canadian negotiators that you can't make trade deals with other countries. And frankly, no country's going to stand up for that. And good for Mark Carney for doing what he did. His approval rating, by the way, is about 10 miles above where Trump's is for exactly this reason. Now, you asked about the impact on Canadian and American consumers. American consumers are already facing the brunt of higher prices through Donald Trump's tariffs and the war in Iran. Both of those are hitting the consumer in their wallet. They're pushing exactly the wrong way on affordability, which is people's main concern. Now, these last stream of tariffs are on things like sporting goods, on alcohol, on spirits, textiles, some electronics. But the war in Iran, let's not forget about that. That's putting real upward pressure on not just gas prices, but diesel prices, and that feeds into grocery costs.
We put the map up there about the things, some items that are impacted by the tariffs. These are the battleground states where Canada is a top exporter. North Carolina, Georgia, Michigan, Maine, Ohio, Iowa. This feels like a terrible, if nothing else, political midterm strategy, Jared.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
So look, economists, not political commentator, but yes, you're right.
I mean, we used to call the economists all the time in my book. I'm like, can we do this? Does this make sense? And what is this going to hurt?
There are Democrats who are looking at this and saying, this is helpful to us in precisely the way I just said. They're going before their voters saying affordability. Remember how you put this guy in the White House to help you with prices? It's not that he's just not doing anything to help you. It's that he's pushing hard in the other direction. You heard Susan Collins today is in a bit of a struggle up there, rejecting this Canadian tariff, sounding a lot closer to Carney than to Trump. But I want to bring somebody else to the table here, a different political leader who I think is loving every day of this. And that guy's name is Xi Jinping. This is the Prime Minister of China. And
he'll be here soon.
And he will be here in late September. And he's watching all this and rubbing his hands together and saying, bad for America, good for China. Now, what does Mark Carney got to do when a country like ours, to whom he exports 75% of their goods, when that barrier gets shut, when that barrier gets raised and that channel gets closed, he looks to other countries. Same thing in Europe, same thing in South America. And what country is sitting there saying, hey, we'll do business with you? It's China. So not only is this screwing consumers in the near term, it's undermining America competitiveness in the long term.
So on President Xi, this afternoon, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent came out and said that the U.S. is going to put economic pressure, economic sanctions like nobody has ever seen before on countries that do business with Iran. China buys 90% of Iranian oil.
Correct.
And we've heard these kind of threats before, but when it comes to Russia, right, China makes up 50% of the buying of Russian oil, and secondary sanctions haven't been placed on Russia to try to get Russia to stop its war there. And so the question that was posed to Secretary Bessent today was pretty direct about why all this talk? Why not just move forward with it? I want everybody to listen to Bessent's response.
Well, we are giving everyone the opportunity to remedy bad behavior. Why would I want to blow up the global financial system? We believe that it is important to level set and give people a cure period, but they should know that that will move very quickly and that we are serious.
He didn't say China a single time during his address today. And folks should remember 1 year ago, Donald Trump tried to do a trade war, 145% tariffs. China said, OK, we'll do 125% tariffs in return, and we'll cut off your access to rare earth minerals. Donald Trump and the Trump administration stood down. Is there any teeth behind what Scott Bessent today said? Is there any country, including China, that takes them seriously?
Your analysis is exactly the same as mine. There's no teeth there. And the reason there's no teeth there really redounds to China. You played Mark Carney standing up to Trump, and that's great for him. That's great for his politics. It certainly makes sense in terms of the Canadian outlook. But they do depend a lot more on our economy than we on them. China, on the other hand, Trump has not been able to bully China. He has stepped down every time they've come back at him. Why? Because China exports some things to us that we desperately need. You've heard of rare earths. These are critical minerals that go into our electronics, our defense goods, our missiles. And China is well aware of the bargaining power, the leverage they have over Donald Trump in this regard. And what you just heard there was Scott Bessent purring like a pussycat as soon as somebody raised China, because he knows that that's a key linchpin in going after Iran economically. Can't do it.
Speaking of Canada trade trouble, joining us live from Kyiv, where she is meeting a number of Ukrainian leaders right now, former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland. And Chrystia, thank you very much for taking a break from what you're doing there to talk about the news that very much impacts your country. First, if you can just tell us your response to what has been happening with the breakdown of trade talks and also some of the things that have been said by President Trump about Canada and, of course, your prime minister's reaction.
Well, it's great to be with you, Mika. And, I would just say, I am so proud of Canada. I am so proud of Prime Minister Carney. And I think people should know, the world should know, that the entire country is 100% behind him. Canadians really understand what's at stake. They understand that this has become, through no wish of Canadians, a fight over Canada's sovereignty. And Canadians recognize that that means we absolutely have to stand firm. Shortly after President Trump was reelected and sworn in, Stephen Harper, a former Canadian prime minister, a conservative, so from the other party, said that Canada should be prepared to suffer any amount of economic damage to stand up for its sovereignty. So I think it is a cross-party national consensus. It's really sad, Mika, that I'm even saying these words on an American TV show. It's kind of astonishing to me, but that's where we are. And I really don't believe that most Americans, or even a lot of Americans, want to threaten Canada's sovereignty. We have a great working relationship, and I just hope Americans will stand up to their own government and say, what the heck? Why are you doing this?
So, Chrystia, obviously he's had broad political support at home. The economic consequences could be serious. I mean, inflation could rise. You could have people losing their jobs. And I think European leaders are now looking at Mark Carney and kind of thinking, was the Mark Carney way of standing firm against Trump the better way? And were they too concerned about the political and economic backlash that their countries might suffer? Do you think Does Mark Carney now represent a model that other countries you think should follow when it comes to how to deal with Donald Trump?
Absolutely. This is long overdue. America's allies on Liberation Day, the day the massive tariffs were announced, should have collectively said, we're really sorry. We are your friend. We are your ally. But we are not going to accept this kind of one-way attack. And I think if they had done that, we would have seen a much saner U.S. administration. But it's not too late. It's never too late to do the right thing.
Just really quickly, Chrystia, what's your message to fellow Canadians?
I don't think Canadians really even need my message because Canadians are all absolutely standing strong. Canadians are united. Canadians get it. But my message to Americans is, please cut it out. We are your friend. We are your ally. We are your neighbor. We have a relationship that has worked so well for decades. As Maggie said on your show a minute ago, we actually have a trading relationship governed by a trade deal that Donald Trump negotiated. I was Canada's negotiator. It's one of the only things that Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump both agreed on. It's a great deal. Let's get back to being sane and being friends and maybe working together on the real problems in the world, like Russia, China, Iran.
Former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. We really appreciate it.